right. Good evening. Good evening. I guess it's evening here. Sun hasn't set yet, but we're all in the late afternoon stages, have had dinner. I'd like to introduce the panel we've got here. These are all, I guess I've got Elder Jeremy, I've got moderator Bass Reeves, and moderator Rob Anderson from our from the patron group that I started, but we all work together with. So Parlay with Pete, most of you or the bulk of this is going to be seen or heard with Parlay, but we certainly will put a portion of this on YouTube because we would like to issue a fairly strong statement here. One of the things that we have seen recently, or we've been seeing for a while, but are increasingly challenged by seeing men that come into an understanding of headship. They come into an understanding of polygyny, biblical marriage, something we all talk about, something that I promote often on my channel as being biblically righteous, not necessarily something for every man to do, but as being biblically righteous. And I think sometimes men get this information and are unprepared for what potentially can happen. And so we really want to take a few minutes to talk about what men need to do and the thought process that they need to have from the very beginning in terms of what happens when the information comes across their radar and suddenly their wildest fantasy is unleashed. So men, I don't know exactly where we want to start here. Jeremy, would you like to kick off with a little bit here and let's kind of set the stage for us?
I will say that for every 5 men I see that come to this knowledge and understanding, at least one of them blows up his family in the process. And not even necessarily because he attempts to do it, but just learning about it, being excited about it, and then going about, talking about it and or pursuing it in a very unwise way.
Right. We have both seen families blown up simply because a man came to this understanding and talked about it openly before he was ready to properly defend the position.
Yeah, and it's a process that we see repeated ad nauseum, and it doesn't have to be that way. And if there's one thing that I can convey, it's that stop, right? Seek some counsel from some men who have had this understanding for a length of time and are seasoned in how to deal with it. Seek some counsel from them before you just go talking to anybody and everybody that you can get to listen to you. Especially your family, especially your woman.
Certainly, one of the sentiment that you share there is something that we have all talked about being very direct with, and that's the big stop. Just stop. You got to take stock. You got to get your feet well grounded. There's a lot that needs to happen before you make polygyny a public discourse in your family life or in your in the public life around your family, because there's so many bad things that can happen.
Publicly, you may never actually talk about it, depending on the situation.
Bass, what would you add to sort of this beginning statement here?
Pete, you said a second ago, men are bringing it out before they're ready to properly defend the topic. The other side to that is we have a lot of guys who are prepared to defend it properly. They spend 6 months with the whetstone sharpening their scripture sword, but they haven't built the foundation to buy the breastplate or shield or the coat of mail to be able to properly, defend the discussion. And so they've got the information there to defend it, but we haven't built the foundation that it takes. Understanding headship and patriarchy, understanding Torah, understanding the validity of God's law and moral instructions and how to go about teaching and bringing someone through that. And they don't have the foundation of emotional intelligence in relationship with their wife. And the second thing I would say is the last guy who learned this truth isn't at church anymore. The last guy that you know of that brought an interesting idea to Bible study, he's not in your circles anymore. For some reason, he vanished. And so don't believe that you're better prepared than he was, that you have built a stronger family than he did. you are no better than the last guy that brought this truth up casually at a Bible study, a dinner party, a parachurch organization meeting, casually to his wife, or started proclaiming it from the street corners. You are no better than him,
Right.
and you are going to end up in the same spot that he did, which you can't find him now because he got disfellowshipped.
And one of the pieces that I ended up having to start doing, which this was preached against many times, by the way, in the circles I ran in, but one of the things I had to start doing was when we were driving home from a church service, I had to unpreach parts of the sermon. And I had to instruct my woman and my children that, hey, this part when he said this, when he said that thing, he was wrong about that, and here's the truth about that according to Scripture. That was my responsibility, and that's your responsibility.
Mhm.
And you're going to hear your pastor and other people in that church tell you that that's wrong to do, that you're undermining the authority of your pastor. Well, guess what? He doesn't have authority.
Exactly.
The only authority he's got is whatever you choose to give him. And if he's attempting to claim authority in your household over your woman or your children, that's out of line.
We tend to think of leaving the church as the extreme step. That's the foundational step. So
Yeah.
practicing patriarchy is the extreme step. So people believe they can do the extreme step, of practicing patriarchy while still in the church, and don't recognize they have to leave the church, which is the extreme step that you take in the beginning before you start really
Yeah.
practicing patriarchy. One of the things I heard often throughout the beginning of this journey was, you need to be getting fed, and you need your wife to be getting fed. You need your family to be getting fed. And finally I said, I don't want them getting fed poison grass. And
Yep.
when you accept the needing to be fed designation, you are giving the pastor if you had livestock. I've got 2 dogs right now. It's still working on some other livestock, 6 chickens that I can't corral yet. But I'm not going to let someone else feed my chickens or feed my dogs.
Right.
I need to be the one feeding my dogs.
Right.
I need to be the one feeding my chickens. If I hire somebody to do some feeding, they need to be feeding them what I am already doing the feeding of, not their own special mix that they brought in. And we have a thing in Western culture, not just with church, with a lot of areas of our lives, where we tend to recognize and cede authority to these different professionals and experts in our lives, be it doctors, teachers of our kids at school, um, the pastor at church, our bosses at work, our wife's boss at work, which you should not be considering anything about patriarchy if you're still renting your woman out to someone else. Um, you're not a husband at that point, you're a pimp. All of those areas, those influences have to be reined in before you can get around to teaching the heavy patriarchal stuff. Because if you're not the one feeding your sheep, somebody else is feeding them their own mix.
This is extremely, extremely important. And we can go through a whole lot of details, all the way through, but that's the main message here, right? Just stop. Don't don't go crazy, because we've seen it over and over and over and over again. Men's families just being absolutely torn apart when this is handled incorrectly. I know it's exciting. I know you want to tell people, you want to, to tell friends, you want to talk to your pastor about it. Maybe your pastor is one of your closest friends. My pastor was one of my closest friends when I found this truth out. Thankfully, he actually didn't react extreme. I was blessed in that. Ultimately, guess what? I'm not there anymore, right? It's just not a good idea. We've seen it over and over. Pete and I especially, and Bass as well. We've seen it many, many times where it just blows up because the foundation isn't laid properly to bring it up. So,
Bash, you got comments to follow that up with?
I do. 5 do's and 5 don'ts as you're coming into this.